Now, the head of the African Union Commission has appealed for an end to the conflict between Israeli forces and the Palestinian militant group Hamas, which has killed hundreds on both sides. Musa Faki Mahamat called on both parties to return without preconditions to the negotiating table to implement the principle of two states living side by side. He wishes to recall that denial of the fundamental rights of the Palestinian people, particularly that of an independent and sovereign state, is the main cause of the permanent Israeli-Palestinian tension. Israel's army said the land, sea and air attack, which saw Hamas fighters shooting residents in Israeli towns and settlements, had killed more than 200 Israelis and wounded 1,000.
Rise Chief Correspondent joins us now from London, where he's been monitoring events. John Cookson, it's good to have you with us. What's the latest you're hearing from Israel and Gaza?
Good afternoon, guys. Well, the grave situation in the Middle East continues to deepen at this hour. The Israelis' main focus at the moment is to try to regain territory seized by Hamas militants yesterday close to the Gaza Strip. This surprise, shocking, unprecedented incursion by Hamas militants taking Israel and indeed the wider Middle East by complete surprise, and Hamas militants still controlling some areas. The Israelis say they're conducting so-called mopping up operations in 8 particular territories, and it will be of great relief to the leadership in Israel that these territories be retaken as quickly as possible. Bombings have still continued in the Gaza Strip, mostly at perceived Hamas positions there. And overnight, the Israeli town of Ashkelon came under attack from Hamas rockets, wave after wave of rockets fired across out of Gaza over Ashkelon and elsewhere. Israel's Iron Dome defense system managed to take out most of the rockets, but some did land. The death toll so far, sadly, is 400 Palestinians killed in this recent upsurge of violence, 313 of those from Israeli air raids. Some 300 Israelis are dead, and dozens have been taken hostage, which is, frankly, Israel's worst nightmare, because these hostages will be used as human shields in Gaza, and Hamas may well also decide that they want to use them for prisoner swaps in the coming weeks and months. And you can be sure that the hostages will be taken to militarily sensitive areas in Gaza to prevent those areas being attacked by the Israelis. Elsewhere, 2 Israelis have been shot dead in Egypt, and their tour guide. That's the first attack on Israeli citizens for a long, long time in Egypt. And a British citizen, Jake Marlowe, is either missing or taken hostage. He was at a music festival near the Gaza Strip when the Hamas invaders moved in, and he was, as I say, either taken hostage or shot. So the British government showing some concern about that.
All right, John, we are yet to hear what the Israelis are going to do next. What are your best guess so far?
It's hard to say exactly what's going to happen next, because we're into uncharted territory at the moment. This has never happened before in this decades-long conflict. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, who leads a weak government at the moment, is under huge pressure to do something dramatic to resolve the situation. And I mentioned yesterday when we were talking that this might include a ground invasion of Gaza. This has happened before. The Israelis pulled out in 2005. But, guys, that takes a lot of planning to keep casualties to a minimum on the Israeli side. And that is something which I'm sure that they're working on at the moment, because it will take something like a dramatic ground invasion to regain, frankly, the credibility of the Netanyahu government at the present time. So I'm thinking that they're working on that. Meantime, they will be, to use an expression, softening up targets in Gaza, taking out, as I mentioned earlier, known commanders' homes and places where Hamas is believed to store ammunition, which sadly for the Palestinian people is right in the middle of areas occupied by civilians.
Indeed, John. Now, has there been any significant reaction from Palestinians in the West Bank on this conflict so far?
Not so far. There have been clashes between the Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank, but frankly that happens on a daily basis. And there have been demonstrations of support in the West Bank for the Palestinians in Gaza City. But there's been no mass movement, military movement by militant forces in West Bank against Israeli troops. That may well be something to do with the fact that politically the Palestinians in the West Bank are not united. The main movement, Fatah, led by Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah, has had recent fallings out with other factions in the West Bank. So they're not coordinated. So although, they're all Palestinians and brothers, to take on the Israeli army, air force and other military operations in Israel would take a united front by West Bank Palestinians, and united they are not at the moment.
All right, not united, but there's a potentially troubling new development in north of Israel. What more can you tell us about this?
Yes, what's happened overnight is there has been an exchange of rocket fire between the Israelis and Hezbollah forces in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah backed like Hamas by Iran, and they have hundreds of thousands of missiles, some of them long range, which Hezbollah can fire into many targets in Israel. However, that seems to have calmed down a little bit, but the threat from Hezbollah still hangs very, very heavily at the moment, and the Israelis have been boosting their military presence in northern Israel to stave off a potential attack. But as I say, the main threat from Hezbollah comes from their rocket power supplied by Iran.
Very good, John. Just before you go, there's a call for a unity government in Israel over this conflict. What are your thoughts there?
Yes, Netanyahu called for a government of national unity. Of course, there have been political upheavals in Israel in recent months, largely to do with the ongoing protests about judicial reform in Israel. My guess is that they will probably in due course all come together and form a government of national unity, as they have in the past in times of crisis. But we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. I want to say many thanks to you, John Cookson, for your time here on Newsday.